Shooty McBang Bang. Propaganda. Maybe a zombie? Welcome to Thrack Ops. Greetings, everybody. It's Thrack. Hi, how you doing? Is your mom doing okay? I hope so. And I may or may not be employed by the time this episode comes out. Who knows? This year's been kind of rough for me. But before we get into the game, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who's been listening to the show, liking the posts on social media, sharing it around, all that good stuff. You guys are the best, and I'd have you in any foxhole. And if you're a new listener, welcome. I hope you enjoy the ride, because today it's going to be quite a wild one, as we are discussing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. This is the 6th mainline entry in the series, and the newest from Infinity Ward. And to me, this is the game that put Call of Duty right into the mainstream. Modern Warfare 1 was the beginning of it entering the mainstream, and it was a huge deal. And to the point where this was probably one of the most anticipated games I had ever seen up to this point. And by the time this game came out, it firmly planted the flag of Call of Duty into the mainstream. And it would not go away for a very long time, if really ever. The series is still mainstream, even if its impact is not as much as it used to be back then for this one. And that's because this game was just such a huge success, and the success still looms large over the entire series. The development for this game started right after Modern Warfare 1, and during that time, they had all kinds of, crazy ideas for this thing. Their main thought was, what if Modern Warfare 1, the whole mission was a failure, and it sort of leads to the events of Modern Warfare 2, which is kind of true when we get into the plot, but they had all these crazy ideas like outbreaks, viruses, chemical warfare, aliens, even the living dead, which is a quote from an interview from a producer at Infinity Ward. And some of these ideas would get explored later on, but for now, this game is a closer follow-up to Modern Warfare 1 than some of the more wacky stuff we may see later. But this is the beginning of the series becoming more schlocky and almost feeling like an action movie. And I'll detail that when we go through the plot. And being the most anticipated game of 2009, and arguably of the latter half of the 2000s in general, when it was released, it broke all kinds of records, selling almost 5 million copies on day one, surpassing GTA 5 as the most successful entertainment launch of the time. And by November of 2013, the game had sold 22.7 million copies. And I remember at the time, just about everybody had this. I got my copy in about early 2010, according to my achievement list on Xbox, probably with gift card money from Christmas. And yeah, we were all looking forward to it, really hype off of the success of the first Modern Warfare. And with World at War kind of coasting on that success, but not doing a lot to elevate it, this was the game everybody was looking forward to. And at the time, I absolutely loved it. But the question is, in 2025, do I still love this game? That's a good question, and something that I haven't fully explored yet, but I'll probably figure out my feelings as we go through the plot and discuss the gameplay and all of that good stuff. So we're going to take a little music break, and then we are going to get right into the plot. Stay tuned. So our story begins 5 years after the events of Modern Warfare 1. During the opening credits, we get a montage of various events that happened during the first game, and we get notified of what has happened since, where Zakhaev has been declared a hero and a martyr by the ultranationalists who have completely taken over Russia, despite your best attempts in the last game. Now one of his underlings, a man named Vladimir Makarov, is committing acts of terrorism all over Europe. So we start with our training mission, this time in Afghanistan, as Private First Class Joseph Allen, where your commanding officer, a man named Sergeant Foley, who's voiced by Keith David, is instructing all of these Afghan soldiers how
Striker
to shoot
wins.
shit. So Allen's going to show you how to shoot, and that's where you get your normal, like, aiming down the sights, shooting through little pieces of wood, that kind of a stuff. And then we move into a section called The Pit, which is a new version of the ship course in Modern Warfare 1, but instead it's bigger and it's outdoors, where the game gives you a handful of weapons you can choose, and then you have to run through the course as fast as possible, taking out all of the enemy targets and avoiding civilian targets as you go. Accuracy plays a big role in helping to trim down your time. And I found this course a lot of fun, and it lets you repeat it over and over again. And I was able to get it under 30 seconds, which is for an achievement in the game. And I did it consistently using pistols. So if you guys want to give it a shot, I would say, yeah, get the M9 and the USP-45, and then use those for being able to traverse the course, because they're much more accurate and they're easy to swap to compared to rifles. But after this, we get to our first proper mission called Team Player, where we're still playing as Alan. We have to assist in taking over an Afghan city, and we start using our grenade launcher, and we're shooting it to the enemies on the other side of a river as we're trying to be able to cross a bridge. But right before that, you're laying on the ground after surviving a vehicle explosion, and you're being assisted up by somebody named General Shepard, who is a very important character in this game, but I will cover him as we get deeper in. So after using your grenade launcher, they're able to make it like a new bridge to cross over this blown highway. We get into the machine gun nest of a Humvee and move into the city just before an airstrike lays waste to the buildings that you were firing at. You're moving through the city. Things feel very, very tense, with civilians kind of popping in and out of buildings. And there's even a part where you see some Afghan soldiers just kind of checking you guys out unarmed. And the soldiers kind of make notice of that. Like, oh, they're probably just checking us out. You get to a point where you turn a corner, and you're facing a school, and the school has a bunch of RPG troopers sitting on top of the roof, and they immediately start firing on your squad. And you manage just to get out of that, and then you get ambushed by some trucks with machine guns, but another RPG soldier just blows up your Humvee, and you're able to survive it. You survive 2 explosions in one level. Crazy. But you're able to get out of that one. You go into a house that's like right next to you for cover, and then from there you guys go into that same school, and then you fight through it to come out on the other side where the mission ends. And the mission ends with Shepard basically saying that you're going to be under his command from here on out.
Gentlemen, good work on taking the town. Private Allen, you'll be taking orders from me from now on. I'll brief you on the chopper. Let's go.
And with that, we start the next mission, which is called Cliffhanger. And this time we're not playing as Allen. Instead, we're playing as Sergeant Gary Roach Sanderson, who is a member of Task Force 141. And we're on a very steep cliff in the mountains of Kazakhstan. It's, snowy, dead of winter type of stuff. And our mission is to infiltrate a Russian airbase in order to collect information. And here we are joined by I want to say a familiar face, but we've never actually seen his face or even his voice before. And that is one Captain John Soap McTavish.
Take a scenic with me. Let's go.
Yes, folks, he now has a face and a voice. The voice is done by one Kevin McKidd. So we start off this mission using ice axes in order to climb up the ledge that we're hanging on in order for us to sneak into the base. A blizzard comes by and it disguises our entrance, so we're able to cross through over into the airfield so we can plant some C4 as sort of a backup plan. And then you meet up with Soap, where he says that you took the scenic route, and you go up into like the second floor of the airbase in order to get the American ACS module while Soap waits in the hangar. But as he's waiting in the hangar, he gets ambushed by a bunch of Russian soldiers who hold him at gunpoint. And, you kind of sneak through, and then he says, initiate Plan B. And so you initiate Plan B, which is blowing up the C4 that you had just planted, and that helps assist you guys in your action movie-style escape. And this is really where that sort of almost kind of schlockiness really starts to come into play, because you and Soap are kind of running through this airbase, just like kind of shooting everybody who's getting in your way, and once you cross over it, you slide down a hill. Some guys in snowmobiles come and ambush you. You knock them off the snowmobiles, and then you get on them, and you do this, big harrowing escape that's very sort of James Bond or even kind of Mission Impossible, racing through the icy wilderness and even doing a big jump across a big chasm at the very end of it so you're able to escape. And yeah, I mean, it's a fun, exhilarating mission, but you can kind of tell they've turned up some of that, like, corniness, maybe to appeal to a more mainstream audience. I'm not quite sure, but now it's time for everybody's favorite mission, a mission that I thought happened way later in the game that it actually does. It is the most infamous level in the game, and that is No Russian.
С нами Бог. Remember, no Russian.
So in the little briefing before this mission starts, General Shepard talks about how it has costed a lot of money to get you within Makarov's inner circle, changing your identity to a character named Alexei Borodin. Which, a fun fact, that name is actually taken from two characters in the original Call of Duty, Alexei Boronin, who is your playable character, and Sergeant Borodin. So we are part of this team that Makarov has assembled to commit this massacre at the Zakhaev International Airport in Russia, with the goal of using this attack to, start World War III, or at the very least begin a Russian invasion on the United States. Makarov famously says no Russian in order to take away any sort of Russian interference. And so you famously walk out of the elevator, and with light machine guns, the team just open fires on a bunch of civilians. And then you sort of just, slowly walk through the airport. They're just kind of massacring everybody, civilians, lightly armored airport guards, until you get outside of the airport where, sort of like SWAT and military police come in and fight you more, until you get to the very end of the mission where you are escaping through a medical vehicle, but Makarov, right as he's pulling you in, he just shoots you in the chest, knowing that he knew about you all along and was using you essentially for bait so that they could pin this on the United States. And this is a famous, controversial mission. I remember at the time this was something that was on the news, sparked a lot of debate, and it's kind of easy to see why, because while games like this have been violent in the past and, you would commit violent acts, some of, debatable plausibility, a game that lets you do something this drastic and this sort of dramatic to civilians, basically committing an act of terrorism, basically, is very crazy to think about even to this day. And like, does the mission still hit? I'm not sure, because it's kind of hard for it to hit, because especially when it's going to happen, and the game, even if you're not aware of it, right, and you're booting up Modern Warfare 2 for the first time, the game puts all of these sort of warnings in front of you saying, like, oh, there's some disturbing content, there's this one mission that's really fucked up, you can skip it if you want. Like, they go through all that rigmarole of not having any achievements or trophies for this section, you can skip the mission, all kinds of stuff, which in some way kind of takes away from its impact. but I can tell they were sort of worried about any genuine blowback to the series from this mission. And it didn't really affect it. It just kind of caused a lot of people to talk about it. To the degree of it being like a Grand Theft Auto style controversy, because when the Grand Theft Auto games were really at their peak in the PS2 going into GTA 4 on 360, there was always like news pieces about how these games are violent and corrupting our youth and whatever. And I think Call of Duty was able to take the bait for this particular moment in time. And some observations I noticed were, obviously you don't have to shoot anybody in this mission. You don't have to. All of these civilians that get murdered are all adult males. I noticed walking through the airport there were no women or children character models, which helps, but it doesn't completely take away that impact because it's still kind of a horrible thing. And I've noticed this mission can still create a visceral impact out of people, especially Americans. And I understand. And it can also come off as like exploitive, where it feels almost completely unnecessary because, it's optional. You don't really have to do it. And it does contribute to the overall plot, but in a way, the sort of lack of genuine participation can almost make you think, what's the point? Like, why would they bother doing this if they felt they didn't need to in the first place? But I think that was sort of what they were trying to do, was create something that was just memorable. And it absolutely is memorable. Like, we're still talking about it. And, the phrase "no Russian" became kind of a term amongst my friends when this game was current, which is kind of morbid and weird when you think about it. But we also were, like, in high school. So, we were just trying to be cool, I guess. I'm not quite sure on that one. But, yeah, it's just, it still makes you uneasy. And it still kind of makes you uncomfortable. And I think that was the point. And if so, I would argue it did its job, In fact, there was an interview with one of the developers on this game where they had said at one point, like, when you're going up the escalators, they almost wanted to turn it into like a traditional Call of Duty mission right after that, where, a bunch of guys start shooting you and you start doing normal Call of Duty stuff. And they took that out because it made it come off way too, like, gimmicky. And I think it would have. There's a little bit of that at the very end when you get outside the airport, sorry. But at the same time, you don't have to shoot any of those guys. You do not have to participate at all in this mission. You can just kind of sit there and observe it. And yeah, it's still kind of a weird mission to think about, even to this day. And I don't know if my analysis helped or hurt the whole process, but I can see why some people think it's kind of gross and not really necessary, and in some ways it is, but in other ways it's still one of the most famous and impactful missions in video game history. So in a way, it did its job. Yeah, I'm still kind of torn about it. In a way, I feel like I'm still kind of torn about my opinion of this game in general. But yeah, like, if anybody listening, if you have, contacts to me in Discord or social media, please give me your thoughts on No Russian. I would love to hear them. I probably should have got them before I did the episode, but yeah, if you're listening and you have thoughts about No Russian, please let me know, because I am curious to what other people think about it. So, but it's not the only kind of almost political discussion we'll have about this game, so kind of stay tuned for the rest of those. But from here, we move to the final mission of Act 1 called Takedown, which sees Roach and Company tracking down the arms dealer Alejandro Rojas, who is responsible for supplying the shooting. And they find that he's located in Rio de Janeiro. This mission is a very fast-paced one. You're kind of just going through these neighborhoods and taking out enemies along the way and trying your best to avoid civilians. If you've ever seen kind of like Brazilian slums, where it's a lot of like real tightly packed buildings with very sort of thin staircases and tight corners, they very much replicate that. It comes across as like a claustrophobic and intense sort of section. And for a level, it's, really good. I like the level design, and it is sad to think about people live in that type of environment. But we eventually find Rojas. We see him trying to escape via the rooftops, and we're chasing through, taking down people as much as we can. But eventually, Soap is able to capture him by kind of just jumping out of nowhere and just tackling him like right onto the top of a car. It doesn't kill or injure either of them in any sort of significant way. Once again, a action movie schlocky kind of a moment here, which again, it kind of hurts any sort of attempt at realism. Because I could see maybe a situation where that would happen, but I feel like that would have caused major damage, and they never really report any sort of damage from that. But then right after that, fan favorite character Ghost is trying to get us extracted out, but unfortunately we can't due to something that is going on the other side of the world. Well, the northern half of the world, because we would be in the southern hemisphere, which leads us right into Act 2.
San Bravo, we're reading 70 bogeys in your sector. Please verify.
Very funny, Station. That's a big negative, over.
Yeah, might be a glitch in one of the ACS modules.
San Bravo, be advised, running diagnostics to scan for malfunction.
The skies are clear, Station. You've got yourself some phantom dots. Over.
Zulu X-Ray 6, signs in your sector of some 100 bogeys. Please advise.
Negatory, Station. Scope is clear. I don't know what to tell you. Solar interference, heavy sunspot activity today.
Sierra Delta, we may have a minor ACS fault here. Do you have anything on your scope? Sierra Delta, repeat.
I'm looking at fighter jets over I-95! How the hell did they get through?
Stand by, attempting to contact the nearest unit in that sector.
Russia is invading the United States, so after Private Allen's body is found and no Russian, he becomes the scapegoat that is needed for this invasion to happen, as they're able to place the blame for the massacre on the United States. And now we are having to defend from this invasion in the first mission called Wolverines. If you don't know that reference, then go get your stuffed animals and head to bed, kid. It's a little late for you. Anyways, now we are playing as Private First Class James Ramirez as we are trying to secure codename Raptor. It's never exactly said who codename Raptor is. It's probably just some like high government official, but they don't say it's like the vice president or like a secretary of defense or whatever bullshit. I don't really know. They never say. But his helicopter gets shot down, and his body is then thrown into a meat locker at a nearby restaurant in order to protect him. He is still alive, but they're using that, I think, to tend to his wounds. So we fight through a neighborhood, and then we come out into a square of various businesses, including a bank, a restaurant, a gas station, a diner, like a Taco Bell knockoff, and then everybody's favorite, Burger Town. And so our goal is to survive this heavy dosage of Russian forces until backup arrives. And it's this kind of big moment where you're kind of moving between all the various businesses in order to defend yourself from all kinds of vehicles and helicopters and all that kind of stuff. And I found it interesting in this whole invasion that the Russians are wearing red camouflage. Like, what are you concealing wearing red, I think that's meant to be sort of a slight reference to Russia and maybe, the Soviet Union with the red. I'm not too sure about that. But anyways, we get to use something that's called the Predator missile drone in order to blow up various vehicles and soldiers. And it's kind of like a portable version of the AC-130 from the first game. But it's this little laptop that you open up, and then you can just kind of drop missiles basically wherever. And you're able to get out of there with your new goal of evacuating as many civilians as you can. And that's sort of the ending of the mission. Yeah, there's not a huge amount to say as far as like plot, but it is a very sort of intense mission where you're kind of moving through like all the different businesses, just trying to defend yourself, basically. And the next mission is called the Hornet's Nest. So we go back to Task Force 141. Rojas informs you of someone who can help you stop Makarov. They're located in a Russian gulag. And all we know is like they're a prisoner. I don't even know if we get their number yet, but this is after they like basically torture Rojas in a way that is kind of what you expect from like, you know, this type of media where they're like, oh, if they just do these crazy torture stuff, they'll get the information out of people. You know, probably. So now that we know where we need to go next, we need to get out of there. But as had said before, due to the invasion, they are not able to evacuate you guys out of there. So you have to get out of there a different way. In fact, you actually call upon an old friend in order to get you out of here. A man by the name of Nikolai. And if you played Modern Warfare 1, you know who that is. And this mission is fighting back the militia as you're trying to find a spot for him to land. And as you're doing so, you find like a little open ground, but the LZ is way too hot. So you end up having to climb up to the rooftops, and migrate through those. And then you find a little spot where you can kind of jump on the helicopter. And everybody's able to do that except Roach, which is you. You fall short and land basically in the middle of an alley. And the climax sees you running through the streets with no gun to get back up to the rooftop in order to get out just in the nick of time. Yeah, again, it's another like action movie type thing where you're just kind of sprinting through these various buildings, going upstairs onto the roof, and you see people just kind of shooting at you in all which ways, and if you're moving fast, they'll miss you just about every time. Again, action movie schlock. What the hell are we doing here? But it is exciting. It is like, you know, it gets your heart racing kind of a thing, but it does kind of sit in a bit of stark contrast with what we have seen previous. But we need to go back to the States for the next mission called Exodus. Once again, we are fighting through various houses of suburbia, and this time we have the help of a vehicle called the Striker, spelled like a striker from Mortal Kombat, a hidden gem favorite character of mine.
Striker wins.
But nonetheless, we are able to use a laser sight on our gun in order to direct the fire to the houses as we're trying to secure them. It is neat, but I feel like it doesn't really help that much. Like, it'll get rid of some guys, but it won't get rid of all of them, you know? But we get to the end, we go through like what looks like a gate, a sort of like an entrance, kind of like toll gate almost, to finding a set of anti-aircraft guns, which are sitting basically just on a golf course, and you call some military strikes in order to, you know, blow those fuckers away. But soon after that, Shepard radios you guys saying, hey, you guys need to go secure address 4677 Brookmere Road in order to get an HVI out, or a high-value individual, which we get over there, and we find them dead in a panic room after a plane has crashed into that house. But we get there, we secure the house, and we even take the briefcase that he has. But as we're leaving, one of the soldiers notices a man dead on the ground named Victor. In fact, Victor was one of the guys who survived No Russian along with Makarov. So that's an interesting little tidbit there, huh? But we don't have time to think about that tidbit because we have to go back to Roach for the only easy day was yesterday. So we start this mission. Basically, we're on one of these. You've probably seen them in like action movies. I forget what they're called, but like submarines will like shoot out these little missile things that you can just kind of hold on to. So we do that so we can go underwater and approach this oil rig from there. We get there, and then you and Soap take out two guys who are guarding like the very bottom of it so you can climb right onto it. So why are we going to this oil rig? Well, the oil rigs, there's multiple of them in the ocean, and they are full of SAM sites. And these SAM sites are preventing us from getting closer to that gulag so we can save the prisoner. So we're starting with this one and taking care of all those so that we can then clear the rest out to do almost like a full-on invasion of this gulag to save prisoner number 627. So anyway, we climb onto this rig, and then we have to save hostages as we go. And it introduces this new kind of mechanic, this sort of breach mechanic, where you put this giant like square bomb thing on a door or even like a wall. It'll burst open, and then you'll go in like slow-mo, taking out certain enemies in slow-mo before it goes back to normal speed. And you have to avoid any hostages, any enemies that are killing hostages, or even later on like explosives, so you don't blow the whole fucking thing up. So you're trying to be stealthy when you do these breaches. You save some hostages, and then you get to a certain point where you have to plant some C4 in this one little room, and then you get a new vantage point, and then you see a search party is going to see what's going on. You end up blowing up the C4 on the search party, and then you have to go loud, and then you go loud. You shoot a rocket launcher at a helicopter, which is funny. And you secure this oil rig, because as you are leaving, a bunch of Marines follow right behind you, taking complete control of the rig, saving all the hostages. And this allows you to set up the Gulag invasion, which is going to be the next mission. The next mission is just called Gulag as well, so pretty easy there. And this is like a big ol' action set piece. So we're flying in on some helicopters. We're sitting right next to Soap. You take out some RPG soldiers before you're able to land, and then you land, and then you descend, deep into the prison. At some points, you use riot shields to sort of guide you through, and you're just kind of descending deeper and deeper into this basically hellhole of a prison type deal. And then, you get to the end, you breach the wall, because they're like, oh, we think prisoner 627 is on the other side of the wall. But who appears at the other side of the wall? Who is this prisoner 627, you might wonder? Well,
Drop it!
Son. Place?
This belongs to you, sir.
Who's so?
Come on! We gotta get out of here! Move!
that's right, it's Captain Price. You thought he was gone, wasn't he? Nope, he is back. He was prisoner 627 all along. You have that short little reunion, but after that, you have to make a daring escape because the place is basically blowing up all around you. That was part of the plan, but that part gets started early, so you have to get out of there real quickly, and you're able to using a skyhook to zip right up to the helicopter right before everything goes to shit. So we're going to end Act 2 on the mission Of Their Own Accord, which is us returning to the U.S. invasion. We start out in a little bunker. You're surrounded by all kinds of, dead and dying soldiers. Things just look pretty grim. But your squad arrives from the bunker, and you realize you're in Washington, D.C. The Russians have continued their invasion into the Capitol, and they've taken over all kinds of government buildings, and you're attempting to get those back. So you run into the Department of Commerce, and you are able to reclaim that building, and through a vantage point, you see that the grounds of the Washington Monument are being used to evacuate as many civilians as possible. But through using a bunch of javelins just kind of laying on the ground, you take out a bunch of vehicles, like the BTRs that the Russians are using and the helicopters in order to disrupt them so that the evacuation of citizens and probably other government officials can be done. But as you do, you have to get out of there, and a helicopter comes and picks you guys up. You get into the minigun, and you're about to shoot some guys, but then the helicopter gets shot down, just crashes around the ground, and then it ends in a very dramatic fashion where you're kind of stuck in the rummage of the helicopter. A soldier is giving you his rifle, and then he immediately gets shot, and you're just kind of fighting off the handful of Russian soldiers that are slowly swarming on you and your company. And then at a certain point, a helicopter just shines its spotlight directly onto you, and then it just cuts to black. And that is the end of Act 2.
General Shepard, you're online with Captain Price.
Back from the brink, Captain. Out of the frying pan is more like it. This world looks more like hell than the one I just left. We thought we'd recovered the ACS before the Russians could crack it. We were wrong. Then Makarov turned the U.S. into his scapegoat. Next thing you know, there's flames everywhere. What's this image you're sending me?
You want to put out an oil fire, sir? You set off a bigger explosion right next to it. Sucks away the oxygen, snuffs the flame.
Price, you've been locked away too long. Better get your mind right, son.
Shepard, are you willing to do what is necessary to win?
Always.
We got ourselves a pretty big fire. Gonna need a huge bang.
You've been in the gulag too long, Price. Focus on taking out Makarov.
No time, sir. We need to end this war today.
I'm not asking you, Price. This is an order. You're to...
Looks like we lost our connection.
So we start Act 3 with a mission called Contingency, which sees us trying to secure a docked submarine that Captain Price thinks can end the war. This mission starts off in a bit of a stealthy way, kind of compared to All Gillied Up, where you and Price are trying to sneak through the wilderness to avoid some search parties and all that. But it doesn't last very long, as eventually you get to a small little group of houses, and then all hell kind of breaks loose. And then you get to the submarine, and you have to hold off the forces so that Price can get into the submarine. And we just assume, he's going to secure it, and then we're going to use the submarine to take it to, I guess, the States or something like that. It's never really clear what Price intends to do with it, but the mission ends and Price launches a missile out of it, like a straight up nuclear missile out of it. And then that cuts to a point in where we're in space, and you're an astronaut working on the International Space Station, and you happen to see the missile going over. Going across the globe, and then there's a great big explosion that happens to the point where it completely destroys the International Space Station, and the astronaut that you are playing as just kind of gets thrown into space to their death. Again, ridiculously over the top. And you're probably thinking, holy shit, they're launching a nuke again. This is just like the last game. Well, Price does it in a bit of a different way. So we cut back to Ramirez and the crew in D.C. when the explosion happens, and because it happens in the upper atmosphere, it instead creates an EMP, an electromagnetic pulse, which disables all the electronics in the surrounding area, which Price uses as a way to give the United States an edge in the invasion. So for this mission, Second Son, we see the effects of that. As the spotlight is shining right on Ramirez, due to all the electronics going down, the helicopter crashes, stuff just starts raining down from the skies. It's almost biblical in a sense. And you're able to just get out of the helicopter and you run through the streets as shit is just, falling every which way, and then you're able to get into a house and you take a chance to sort of regroup yourself. A member of your team just starts completely losing his shit and freaking out. And what's interesting is at the start of this mission, your gun basically has no ammo, but once you're able to get in that building and regroup, you just get you get both weapons back, your pistol and your assault rifle, and they're both fully loaded again. Video games, am I right? But anyways, once all that calms down, DC turns into a ghost town. And it even reminds me a little bit of the Metro series. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. That's a good series of games. You should play them. So we're kind of rummaging through everything. Your laser sights are not working because of the EMP. And you meet up with a guy who's a runner, and he says that they are organizing a strike force on a place called Whiskey Hotel. And they're like, oh, you need to join up with them because we're going to, assault Whiskey Hotel, basically. So... And then you join up with them at the Eisenhower building where the quote-unquote real president's bunker is located. And that's basically the end of the mission. There is a little bit of fighting here and there with Foley being shouting star, trying to get the response kind of code signal back, but it doesn't work. And so you fight some people. But this mission, I think, is more about sort of that atmosphere kind of a thing. But we get to Whiskey Hotel, which is the name of the next mission. And that refers to the White House. Yeah, it makes sense, right? Whiskey Hotel, if you know your phonetic alphabet. Apparently, the White House still has power at this point, and it is occupied by the Russians. And we have to launch an attack on it to retake it because they still have power, so we can use that power to contact Central Command. So we start in the West Wing, fight through the press area, go all the way up to the Oval Office, and then in the Oval Office, we hear a speaker behind one of the paintings saying that the Hammer Down protocol has started, which basically implies that when the White House gets taken over, they're just going to bomb it to just take care of everybody and just completely destroy the building, And I think even Shepard says at some point earlier, it's like, oh, we rebuilt it once, we can rebuild it again, which is true. That did happen. But anyways, you figure that out, and then you have to run up to the roof just in time to turn on some green flares and sort of wave them in the sky so that the planes flying by know not to bomb it, and that's like, oh, it's secure, it's back, and all that good stuff. And there's a little bit of a kind of a iffy, maybe controversial little moment that happens just after that as this mission fades. Let's listen to it right now.
So, when we going to Moscow?
Not soon enough, man. I know we're gonna burn it down when we get there.
When the time is right, Corporal. When the time is right.
Yeah, this is... Some about this always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Kind of, promoting some of that, American exceptionalism, imperialism, whatever kind of a thing. It's because it's very similar to the mentality of, like, when 9/11 happened and everything. And just, I don't know, the idea of, like, blowing up innocent civilians in a retaliation mode to this doesn't seem like the right thing to do. I don't know, just this little bit, it's just kind of weird. I don't know, and I know I'm not the only one who thinks this, but that little bit, I don't know. Something about it I don't like. But that is the end of the American side of this conflict, so we return to Roach for the next mission called Loose Ends. And here is we find one of two possible Makarov safe houses to track him down. The one we're at is located in the Caucasus Mountains, and the other one is located in Afghanistan. So Soap and Price have headed to the Afghanistan one, while Roach, Ghost, and the rest of the crew go to this one. So we get to the safe house, and there is no sign of Makarov, but it's like this giant house. It's like an armory. There are like so many different guns and explosives all over the place, which is fitting because we have to, copy all the files on his computer, which we do, and it being 2009, the copy upload speed is not super fast, and it kind of pops in and out. So because of that, we have to defend the safe house so we can do that. And as a kid, I remember this mission being like hectic and nuts and just like very intense and a lot of fun. But I don't know, maybe this time I kind of got lucky because I just sat in one spot, one very specific spot where it's like I'm overlooking the front door and the computer's to my left, and then you kind of go around this almost like a little U, and there's sort of a side door, and I would put a claymore there, and I would just sit there and just snipe a couple guys as they would like just kind of come by or whatever. Maybe that was the strategy the entire time. I don't know, but it definitely made this part a lot easier and almost a tad disappointing, sadly. But it seemed to work, And after that, the game gave me an AK for some reason. I did not have an AK-47, but once we copy all the files, we have to get out of there and head to the extraction point, which we're able to run through. And that's where the big twist happens.
We have the DSM. We've got it, sir. Good. That's one less loose end. No!
Yes, General Shepard is revealed as one of the main villains in the game. He shoots Roach, kills Ghost, throws you both in a pit, and then lights you on fire with his cigar. Pretty sadistic stuff. And I remember at the time this being quite a twist on the story, because you wouldn't expect a game like this would portray an American general as one of the big baddies, right? That they would go that far, especially with the kind of mixed messaging that this game has about U.S. military intervention. So, yeah, I think it still hits. But we cut right to the next mission called The Enemy of My Enemy, which has us returning to controlling Soap. And I find it interesting that Soap just is so fucking chatty the whole game, but once you start controlling him, he just stops talking and becomes the silent character once again. I don't know, maybe he's traumatized because he just lost everybody except for Bryce. Who knows? And here we're in a sort of airfield boneyard in Afghanistan where we realize, like, oh shit, everything's going down. Makarov and Shepard's forces are kind of fighting each other, and you have to sort of run your way through the firefight in order to escape. And it's a pretty intense moment because, you know, all the major story stuff has happened, and any game where it's like, oh, two sides are fighting each other, they're not necessarily fighting you, but they'll fight you if they see you, but you kind of have to just barrel through it all. I've always enjoyed those missions, and I think this one does a good job with that. And during the whole mission, Price is trying to find a way to get us out of here. He's talking to Makarov to try to figure out where Shepard is, and even says to him, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And then Makarov kind of caves and go ahead and gives him where he's located. And so you use those coordinates and then give them to Nikolai, who's able to rescue you two as you get out of there and head to the final two missions. And there's this little section right before these final missions where Price, I said he waxes lyrical in almost a Reznov style just before we do the final missions. I'm going to play it for you in a second, but let me know if this has a Reznov flair to you.
The healthy human mind doesn't wake up in the morning thinking this is its last day on Earth. But I think that's a luxury, not a curse. To know you're close to the end is a kind of freedom. Good time to take inventory. Outgunned, outnumbered, out of our minds on a suicide mission. But the sand and rocks here, stained with thousands of years of warfare, they will remember us for this. Because out of all our vast array of nightmares, this is the one we choose for ourselves. We go forward like a breath exhaled from the earth, with vigor in our hearts and one goal in sight. We will kill him.
And this leads us into Just Like Old Times, where this mission is Price and Soap getting to where Shepard's base is located with his paramilitary mercenary group called Shadow Company protecting him so that we can, well, kill him, basically. And you've been labeled as war criminals, so you're not really going to get any help at this point. And as Price said, it is a suicide mission. But you have to do what you have to do, right? And so you get into the cave, you know, it starts out, you try to be stealthy, but it's not going to last. There's a really cool bit where you're rappelling down the side of a mountain, and you and Price both knife a dude in the side of the head, and almost like a James Bond kind of thing. Again, action movie stuff. And then you fight through these various Afghanistan caves. There's, you know, breaching, and, you know, again, you're outmanned and outgunned like insane, but you're able to persevere just through your sheer, you know, grit and will. After a certain point, Shepard forces the Shadow Company to launch basically an airstrike on itself because he realizes how good Price and Soap are and how close they are getting to achieving their goal of killing him, and he's trying to get out of there. So there's this crazy moment where he, you know, blows everybody up, and they're starting to kind of wobble around. And some of the animations reminded me a little bit of Modern Warfare 1 Remaster right after the nuke. The way some of the soldiers who are still walking around are just kind of trudging on. to try to keep you at bay, but it doesn't work. And then the mission rolls right into the final mission, which is called Endgame.
This is for the record. History is written by the victor. History is filled with liars. If he lives and we die, his truth becomes written and ours is lost. Shepard will be a hero, because all you need to change the world is one good lie and a river of blood. He's about to complete the greatest trick a liar ever played on history. His truth will be the truth, but only if he lives and we die.
And after that iconic Price quote, we are right on the dock, like in an underground cave, and we have to hop on a speedboat, and we start chasing after the helicopter. It reminds me a little bit of that snowmobile bit, but it's a lot more intense, where you have like an Uzi that you can shoot to just take out random enemies. And again, you're chasing the helicopter in this very sort of climactic, again, action movie type feel. But with all of the implications that has happened through the story, it definitely heightens that tension. It's a very intense moment, and eventually you're able to shoot down the helicopter, and as you do, you just completely dive right off of a waterfall, and then you crash. And then as you crash, you're kind of coming to, and everything's like, oh, how the hell did I survive that? There's a big dust storm appearing, and you see Shepard somehow survive that crash and is just kind of, trying to get his bearings, and then you crawl up to him or walk very slowly up to him by a car as a way to try to get him. But as you do, he grabs you, pulls a knife out from his coat, and then just stabs you right in the chest. And then he delivers this very famous quote, trying to explain why he did what he did.
5 years ago, I lost 30,000 men in the blink of an eye. And the world just fucking watched. Tomorrow, there will be no shortage of volunteers, no shortage of patriots. I know you understand.
And if you're not sure, that is referencing the nuke that was dropped back in Modern Warfare 1, where 30,000 Marines died. And it's meant to sort of imply that General Shepard, after seeing that happen, it completely fucked him up. Where you can tell he's an ambitious guy and wants to sort of use this to sort of reclaim American dominance almost over the entire world, and does a lot of evil, dirty behind the scenes things, even, potentially collaborating with Makarov in order to get done what he needs to get done. And by destroying that ACS module, it sort of cleans up any loose ends that he could potentially have. So again, it kind of ties into the mixed messaging of this game, I think, to where, similar to Modern Warfare 1, I feel like it's trying to sort of ride that coattail of being pro-war and anti-war, but I don't think it's doing as good of a job with it, trying to almost say pin everything that, all the bad things that America does is on one megalomaniac type of general. And yeah, what he's doing is absolutely terrible, and he deserves to be the villain for it. But it almost gives that implication of oh, America was led astray. It's similar to the argument I make in 1, where it's if you think about it to where it says oh, America is dumb because they're being led by fools almost. But I don't know. This one has slightly different implications to me. I'm not quite sure if I thinking about it, but it doesn't feel as anti-war as before, even down to say the death quotes, where the death quotes are sort of a mix of oh, nationalism is evil and patriotism is stupid, and then they'll have quotes from Dick Cheney basically saying we got to go kill those bastards. The water is getting quite muddied here. But despite all of that, I do think General Shepard paints himself as like a good villain for this specific story. And after this quote, he's just about to shoot you dead when Price emerges out of nowhere and gets the gun out of his hand, and they start like fist fighting each other. And as they're fist fighting each other, Soap takes the knife that is kind of shoved into his chest, and he's just slowly pulling it out, and you're like mashing the button. And then right when Shepard is on top of Price, just beating the piss out of him, you're able to aim the knife and throw it at him, and it lands right in Shepard's right eye, no matter where you aim it, as long as you aim it on Shepard's body. You can miss, and I remember as a kid I did miss, and it's kind of funny to think about. I should have did it again just to see what would have happened, but I did not in the thick of it, unfortunately. But throwing that knife in the Shepard's eye kills him, and everything's kind of fading to black, giving you that fake out ending. But then Price starts coughing, and he emerges alive, and and Nikolai just lands with a helicopter right next to you, and the both of you grab Soap, and they're like, "Oh, we got to get out of here. I know a place," and mentioning that you guys have been labeled as war criminals, so that's not going to be good for you, and it ends. It is a noticeable cliffhanger ending. It reminds me a little bit of Modern Warfare 1's, where you're sort of laying on the ground and you have to take out the main villain using like not like a rifle, but a smaller weapon to just sort of take him out real quickly. And if you look in the background when all this is happening, it's the Rust multiplayer map, which is pretty neat. And after this, the credits roll, and the credit scene is like a museum where you see all the little exhibits of the various areas that you were at and certain characters, and then you'll see vehicles and all that other stuff. And you actually get to unlock the museum. So after the game is done, instead of the cool mission on the airplane at the end of Modern Warfare 1, here we just get to go in the museum. And the game gives you access to like every gun, and you can just kind of fuck around with them, and you can even push a little button on the desk to activate the soldier characters, and then you can just kind of fight them off with whatever you have, which is a little fun to do if you just want to do that. So it's a neat little bonus, and that kind of wraps up the campaign. It has a lot more spectacle than the original, and I could see why a lot of people would prefer it over the original. I'm not sure if I do, because I think it is the beginning of them getting away from sort of that boots on the ground mentality of the earlier games and steering into almost like Michael Bay territory. It's not as crazy as later games in the series would get, but it is. There are bits in there that I'm just like, I don't know, but it's still a fun game to play. Like, I still really enjoyed my time with it, barring any sort of weird geopolitical ideas that this game may have. So yeah, and yeah. So let's move on to, I guess, just as I mentioned, like the general gameplay. Like, how does the game feel compared to the original Modern Warfare 1? I feel like it's a lot better. This game, they did a big old upgrade to the IW engine, and you can like feel it. The game feels a lot tighter than the original. It looks a lot better. Like the character models, the environments, everything just take a big graphic step up. And they even introduce a lot of new things. Like I had mentioned, the snowmobiles, the Predator drone. You get to use thermal scopes. So when certain enemies will drop smoke screens, you can use these thermal scopes to see right through and take them out. You get a couple guns have a heartbeat sensor, which, it'll just kind of beep continuously and show you where various characters are on the map, which I think is pretty cool. There's one scene where you get ambushed by a bunch of mines that just kind of like shoot up and you have to dodge. Certain missions will have ammo boxes to where you can just crouch right next to them and just hold X and just replenish all of your ammo. That tends to be more in the American side, which would make sense considering everything that's going on. The riot shields, which are a nice addition. The riot shields, they remind me a little bit of the ones from Rainbow Six Vegas, but you can't use a gun with those. You have to you can ram people with them using the melee, but that's kind of about it. And the allies do a lot better job of informing you of where enemies are. So in Call of Duty 2, I had mentioned in that episode, it was the beginning of them creating sort of dynamic AI, not just for the enemies, but also your allies, to where the enemies won't come out of the same spots every time. They'll kind of adjust depending on what you're doing as a player. And the allies will say, like, oh, enemy over here, enemy over there. In this game, they'll even, like, say your name. They'll say, like, Ramirez, there's an enemy over by Burger Town, or something like that, which actually was helpful because in certain instances, you may not know where all the enemies are coming from, or there might be a fresh batch of them. And so an ally will say that to you, like, right then and there, which will help you direct your fire to where it needs to go. And yeah, as I said, the graphics are just so much better this time than the first game. The first game had a weird, like a muddy kind of, like, gray sort of hue on the whole thing. Like, the colors were all very muted or just kind of focused on, like, gray or kind of brown, you know, depending on where you were in particular times, you know, like the sepia filter, you know. But this game does a lot better with colors. And I think by 2009, there had been enough complaints about games being all gray and brown and yellow that newer games are like, okay, let's focus more on the color. Let's bring it back. And you feel like there was a more concerted effort. Like, even with, like, Gears of War 3, like, that game is very colorful. And this game, I think, does a good job with the color as well. And the music is very good. And yeah, the controls, to me, I mean, it controls the exact same as the first game, but it feels a lot smoother, I think. Things like when you snap the aim down the sights to, you know, kind of lock on to enemies, that feels a lot quicker. Like, the whole game has a much quicker pace to it compared to the first game. You know, bordering more on sort of like an arcadey feel compared to the more, like, slower paced of some of the earlier games or even competing series like Battlefield. But speaking of that, let's talk about the multiplayer. So the multiplayer for this game, I played a lot of it back in the day, and it was a lot of fun. But it really was the most fucking insane, wacky multiplayer I think I've ever had in a shooter game of, like, trying to be serious. Because people like to talk about how Call of Duty isn't serious anymore, and it's, like, goofy and silly and all that shit. And they feel like that's a recent phenomenon. But, guys, it started way back in MW2. Like, having the crazy colored nameplates and the wacky sort of outfits and gun designs. They would get crazier later, but this is sort of the beginning. And I remember things like when you would start a map or start a multiplayer match, you would take a throwing knife and just chuck it into the air and just pray to God it would land on somebody. Like, people doing knife tricks. This was like the beginning of quick scoping and no scoping, 360 no scoping. Some of that was in the first game, but this one, with its, like, faster speed and, you know, you could crank that sensitivity up, people just started doing crazy shit, trick shotting and all of that stuff. And it makes playing the multiplayer in this game today like a pain in the fucking ass, because it's really hard to appreciate the multiplayer of any Call of Duty game where the multiplayer is kind of past its prime. And it seems to be a big issue with the Modern Warfare games. Though, if you wait around long enough and hang in there, you could probably play a game with people who are just trying to play it casually. Say, like, I'm trying to do for this show, like, try to do some research to remember. And yeah, the multiplayer is, like, the maps are still good and good, solid variety of game modes and everything, but the likelihood of falling into like a hacked lobby or a trick shot lobby or whatever is very, very high. So it's one of those, you might just be kind of fucked on being able to appreciate this game for what it is or what it should be, which is a damn shame, I think, because in its peak, this was a lot of fun. Even though I mentioned the trick shotting and everything, back then it was funny back then to see people trying to do it, because it was such a recent phenomenon. You would have all kinds of people trying to do these things and just failing them miserably. Those were fun. Like it was fun in that moment, but now the people who do it these days are just really, really fucking good at it. So unfortunately, it might be a multiplayer to avoid. I liked World at War's multiplayer because there's not a lot of that crazy shit. But Modern Warfare 2 definitely is full of the crazy shit, unfortunately. But we have another mode we can talk about called Special Ops. This replaces the arcade mode that was in Modern Warfare 1. I don't know if I talked about it last time. I probably didn't. But arcade mode in that game was essentially you would replay levels, and they'd be like on a timer. You get score multipliers, all that kind of stuff. Very arcadey. But Special Ops takes that idea and does a fresh little twist on it. So it's single player or multiplayer, local or Xbox Live or whatever. And it's various missions kind of broken up into like little chunks. Some are like brand new for this mode, and others are taken from the campaign. And it'll give you various difficulty settings of like, survive this wave of enemies, or blow up all these vehicles, or get to the extraction point in time. All these different kinds of setups. One even has the pit, where if you want to go for, say, that pit achievement or get really good at it, you can do it in the Special Ops. And this mode, I had a fun-ass time with it. I remember back in the day I played it quite a bit, but I had no memory of it, like genuinely none. But looking at my achievement list back then, I had a bunch of them, so I must have played it a lot. And playing it for this episode, I was reminded, it's really fun. It emphasizes that speed and arcadey feeling of the game, but as I said before, breaking it into those little chunks to kind of keep it fresh. And you'll have the various difficulties to get like 1 to 3 stars, and if you get enough stars, you can move on to the next sections. Some of them I hate that they require 2 people to do, so you have to kind of coordinate that, because you can't just set up a Spec Ops lobby and just play that. You have to invite somebody in so you could do it, so which kind of sucks these days, but it's really, really good. I highly recommend it. Like, if you are interested in this game, Spec Ops is a mode that you shouldn't overlook. Like, it's really, really good, and just kind of emphasizes the fantastic gameplay of Call of Duty without having to worry about the iffiness of the campaign and some of the messaging that comes around with that. So one more thing before we get out of here is I need to talk about the remaster of Modern Warfare 2 that came out in 2020 for the PS4, Xbox One, and Microsoft Windows, or the PC. This is just the campaign getting a visual upgrade. There is no multiplayer mode, there's no Spec Ops mode, nothing like that. And I did not play it for this episode. I'm sorry, guys. With the Modern Warfare 1 remaster, there was more to it, and it came with my copy of Infinite Warfare, whereas just the remaster of this is like $20. And I didn't really want to spend $20 just to play this campaign a second time, only to turn around and go, yeah, it's the same game, but it looks a little better. And if you look at any footage of the remaster, you'll probably think the same thing that I do. I'm just like, it looks a little better. It might play more like a modern COD game, a little smoother, but that's really about it. I just didn't think it was worth spending the money on to just do it again and be like, there's not really that much here. In fact, reviews were even just like, like it just wasn't really, it was worth putting more effort in than they did. And we still haven't gotten a remaster of any other older COD games since then. I don't know if it's related to the campaign of this not doing anything, but it would be nice to see maybe some of the older games, like Call of Duty 1 or something, get a nice proper remaster. That'd be neat, wouldn't it? But yeah, I think I'm now all Modern Warfare 2'd out. So thank you, everybody, if you made it this far. Well over an hour of just me talking. Crazy. But yeah, thanks, everybody, for listening. Hope your holiday is going well. And I hope you have a good Christmas and all that good shit. And until next time, which is Black Ops 1, bye-bye.